Oh, dude, where'd you get those Cheetos? Wait, are those my comics? Are you touching my comics with fucking Cheeto hands?
Oh, hey, Scully. What's up, man? Saw that you had a comic book collection here, man. I really appreciate that. I'm a big comic book fan myself. I saw that you had some back issues of Spawn, bro. I hope you don't mind me catching up on them.
Are you seriously getting your filthy hands all over my comic books? Oh my god, do you not have any manners? Who just walks in and starts grabbing other people's stuff without their permission? Where did you even get the Cheetos from?
Whoa, 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 relax, man. I'm using my clean hand to read these comics, bro. I'm not using my Cheeto hand. Plus, I'm a pretty big Spawn fan, man. It's really awesome seeing all these comics. I saw that big-ass collection you got there, too, man. We're almost like brothers with our affinity towards Spawn.
Oh, so you like Spawn, do you?
Oh, yeah, big fan.
Big fan, are you?
No, really big fan.
You sure about that? Really sure?
Oh, for sure, dude.
Okay then, you wouldn't mind playing this.
Spawn Armageddon, huh? Not a bad choice. Not a bad choice.
That's going to be your punishment for getting your dirty-ass Cheeto hands all over my comic books. I can't believe you thought that was cool to do. Do you not have any friends?
Hey, I got friends. Well, had friends. I don't know how long I've been here, man, but it feels like an eternity. Maybe they forgot about me.
Dude, it's only been a day.
Oh. Well, you mind me stepping out for a minute and checking with them, making sure they don't forget about me?
Oh, yeah, sure, go on ahead. Door's right there.
Tight, man. Thanks, brother. I'll be back in a jiffy, bro. I won't take too long. I think your door's broken, dude.
Well, then it's working the way it should, you big dummy. Now sit down and play that game.
Ah, the 90s. What a unique era in time. Easily my favorite decade of human history, the 90s marked a more adult turning point in society as a whole. The TV world got its very first peek into what would evolve into reality TV, with shows like Jerry Springer are highlighting the dregs of our society like some kind of broadcasted circus. The music industry found its representation for teenage, angst-filled edgelords when bands like Korn and Disturbed ushered in the nu metal scene, essentially making the lives of every stepfather out there a living hell by giving every teen a reason to revolt against their parents. Even the comic book industry wasn't safe when a handful of renegades led by a comic artist by the name of Todd McFarlane created Image Comics and dropped Spawn issue number 1, creating the foundation for what would end up being a world record holding series, being the longest running creator owned superhero comic still ongoing today.
Now, before we move on with the game, I want to take a little side quest here and express my admiration and my appreciation for someone who I believe to be the epitome of I'll do it myself. And that's Todd McFarlane.
Todd's the man.
Before even creating Spawn, Todd had already solidified himself as a legend among his peers. Believe me when I say that I can make an entirely separate video on Todd McFarlane's impact on the comic book world and not even touch Spawn. But for the sake of this video, I'll just briefly mention a couple of his most impactful contributions to the comic industry at the time.
He is responsible for one of the more iconic Spider-Man looks during the 90s when he started inking them for Spider-Man. Here you can see him on his Torment run. I'm sure you've seen this image across a lot of t-shirts at conventions. That's Todd McFarlane. Side note, he's also responsible for articulating the webbing even more. If you notice, the webbing on here looks just a little bit more sticky, and before that, it was just like lines. It's weird that Todd gave life to Spider-Man's webbing, but that's the kind of artist he is. He also actually created one of Spider-Man's more iconic villains with Venom. Before this, Venom actually did not have the spider on his shirt, but he was given that afterwards. But yeah, Todd McFarlane created that. Even after redefining an already iconic character and creating a villain that is just as iconic, Todd still felt he could do more. So in the 90s, he started Image Comics. And in May of 1992, he creates Spawn. Now, if 90s was the era of giving the middle finger to modern convention, you can best bet Todd McFarlane was the hand that finger was attached to. Now, this game is a great example of how things can be different from what you remember. When I first played this game back then, I thought it was awesome and mind-blowing to be able to play Spawn on a modern console. Playing it now, the best way I can describe it is, I even tried to doze up on the copium by thinking, well, maybe this game is just a product of its time. Maybe these developers didn't really have a template to follow, and they were just doing the best they can. Nope! Unfortunately, no matter how hard I tried to defend this game, there really is no other excuse for it to be this bad other than bad developers. So here we go, Spawn Armageddon. Now, when I was figuring out how I wanted to talk about this game, I wanted to do so in the same way that I did last episode with Ninja Gaiden. Unfortunately, I can't do that here, for one big reason. The game's boring. Now, it's not the worst, but it definitely wasn't good enough to fill an episode. So instead, for this game, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to focus on 4 aspects of the game: gameplay, level design, music, and story. I'm just going to share my opinions on them. Now, these are just my opinions. It's not gospel. So whether you agree or disagree, share your thoughts in the comments.
The game starts off in the best way possible, with a pre-rendered cutscene showcasing our titular anti-hero doing what anti-heroes do: brood.
My only memory is the burning of flesh. I remember it so vividly. Regret and hatred are all I am made of now. Yet I can remember wonder.
His dialogue here does an alright job at explaining who he is to those who might not know anything about the character, but unfortunately his brooding gets interrupted by a massive blast in the middle of town, and now instead of spending the rest of his days inner monologuing, he's off to investigate.
I made a deal. I sealed my fate whole for the love of my wife. Forced by all things evil to join with 2 miserable companions of misfortune. What the hell is that?
Let's start off with what I feel is the weakest part of the game, and that's the gameplay itself. When you're introduced to combat, the game tells you that there are combos you can utilize, but I found out real early that those combos mean absolutely nothing due to one factor. Every enemy has a hit stun animation that lasts longer than the actual attack animation of your first axe swing. What this means is that as long as you time it right, you can infinitely attack pretty much any enemy because your axe is done swinging before the enemy is done flinching. Even if you didn't want to cheese the game like this, you're kind of motivated to because the combos are so stiff and rigid that they aren't even fun to look at. Because of this, combat felt more like a chore that I had to complete just to enjoy what I could from the game.
Now, going back to earlier when I said I was on copium with this game, one of the first thoughts in my mind when I was exposed to this rain puddle deep combat system was maybe there weren't many good examples of 3D combat out there yet. Much like how GoldenEye really didn't have any good examples of first-person shooters on the N64, perhaps Spawn was a similar case. Nope! As a matter of fact, Spawn Armageddon came out in November 2003. That's 2 years after games like Devil May Cry and Jak and Daxter really showed you what you could do with combat in a 3D environment.
Stupid Namco had no idea what to do with this franchise. Is it too much to ask for a good Spawn game?
Comparing these games to Spawn is a night and day difference and suggests that the developers of the game point of view might have come into this ill-equipped to deliver a fluid combat system. Looking at their development history, this can kind of be confirmed as the only 2 action games in their catalog at this time were Spawn Armageddon and the Scorpion King Rise of Akondion, which came before this game. Looking at the reception of the Scorpion King game, Brad Shoemaker of GameSpot found the combat flimsy and frustrating. Which is kind of funny because you can copy-paste that exact response for Spawn Armageddon and it fits. Luckily, the developers tried to complement this combat system as much as they could with hell powers and guns. And while guns are exactly what you would expect in an action game, covering the smaller pistols all the way to hell cannons, the hell powers are easily the most unique part of the combat system. Spawn has 5 separate hell powers at his disposal. The Necroplasm Ball, which is an AoE attack that acts kind of like a grenade. The Necroplasm Beam is a single railgun style attack. Demonic Fury is a pretty neat damage over time effect to whittle down bosses. Hell Speed is essentially a time slow effect. And the Necro Shield is, well, you guessed it, a shield that reduces damage. The game offers up an upgrade system and talent points to use in that system, but for some strange reason, you can only upgrade your health, necroplasm, and guns, disregarding your axe and your hell powers. This is by far my biggest complaint about the overall combat system of the game. The guns are probably the least interesting part about this game, and the developers chose to have the upgrade system revolve around them instead of the 2 most used aspects of the combat, the axe and the hell powers. As I made my way through the game, I often found myself wondering if I would have the same low opinion of the combat system if it had let me upgrade my axe for more combos, or if I was able to upgrade my hell powers for additional effects. And by the end credits, my opinion on the gameplay design was solidified. Lazy and dialed in. Unfortunately, the very same thing can be said about the boss fights for the game. Besides the gimmicky boss fights for like Violator and Cygor, each boss fight has the same timing issue with their hit stun animation, so you can beat every one of them with the same single attack stun chain.
And it sucks even more knowing that the biggest black eye on this game was something that I feel could have been easily remedied had the developers just taken a little bit more time and tested the combat in this game. Anyways, with that garbage out of the way, let's focus on something that I thought they did just a little bit better.
You can try and run away from this all you want, wizard. But much like my boy Al Simmons here, you're stuck in hell on earth.
Next up, we focused on something I thought was interpreted pretty well, the level design. Looking into this more, I found that Todd McFarlane directed the game's production, but I couldn't find any additional information on how far that reach actually was. However, I feel it's a safe bet to say it included having final say on the level aesthetics because this game does a terrific job at portraying the overall gritty atmosphere of Spawn. From the dingy back alleys of New York to the fiery pits of hell, and the cosmopolitan office environments that make up the angelic stronghold, it truly felt like these scenes were pulled straight from the comic books. There were 3 levels that stood out to me and made me take a second to appreciate them. That would be the hellish conversion of Central Park, with the designs inspiring a comparison to the dark, twisted aesthetics of Tim Burton's version of Sleepy Hollow. The previously mentioned pits of hell, with broken up platforms all saturated in that signature orangish red hue of hell, and also the previously mentioned angelic stronghold, which brings new meaning to the term high-rise office.
On another side note here, the dichotomy between heaven and hell that Todd McFarlane depicts in his illustrations and in the Spawn universe remains my favorite depiction of the two to this day. Anytime hell is involved or something dingy and grimy is happening, it's always happening in the alleys of New York City where everything's just dirty and disgusting. But on the other end, when angels are involved, they're in these giant megalopolis-style office buildings. Everything's so vogue and high society that it's really awesome to see the two. And I think that's what makes it beautiful, because even though you see such a depiction and such a difference between the two, when you go further, you start to realize where the true evil is. And it may not be what you suspect on the surface level.
You know, I've seen angels in real life, and the Todd Father isn't that far off. They're always rubbing it in your face, how much better they are than you. Ooh, look at me, I got a whole body. Look at my hands and my feet. Ooh, I'm so lucky I'm not a disembodied head.
Jumping back into the game, the level designers did a solid job at shaking up the pace of things by offering different kinds of platforming to navigate. In one stage, you're jumping around on crane-operated platforms in a warehouse. In another, you're making your way up a destroyed building. You navigate hell by beating up on tormented souls just to raise the platforms to make it to where you need to go. Moving up the angelic stronghold, you're navigating a maze of office buildings to take out their power. There is a healthy amount of variety in stage navigation that will sometimes make up for the lackluster combat in keeping you entertained.
While not innovative or groundbreaking, the level design in this game did a really good job at carrying some of that weight that the gameplay dropped. There were some legitimate times where I had to use some brain power to navigate to the next section of a stage. Now you pair that with the diversity in platforming across all stages, and getting to the end credits really wasn't as painful as I thought it was going to be.
The music in the game is another reason why I feel that this game's biggest weakness is probably the budget. The game opens up with Use Your Fist and Not Your Mouth by Marilyn Manson, which to any fan is exactly the kind of music that should be used to create the overall atmosphere of Spawn.
This is a black collar soul. Put it in your middle finger, sing along. Use your fist and not your mouth.
Throughout his entire representation outside of written media, Spawn has always been accompanied by the hard, dark tones of industrial metal.
In '97, Spawn the movie came out, and alongside of it came one of the greatest movie soundtracks of all time, Spawn the album. This album did such a good job at lending to the atmosphere because it fused elements like techno, heavy metal, and industrial with collaborations from bands like Filter and the Crystal Method, Marilyn Manson and the Sneaker Pimps. I mean, to this day, I must have bought that album 3 or 4 times only to give it away to friends because I felt like this album really needed to be shared.
Unfortunately, the praise ends at the intro song. While playing the game, the music was alright, but did nothing to really add to the atmosphere. The best way I can put it is that the background music sounds incomplete, as if the composer had a lot of good ideas and good riffs, but just kind of left it at that. No real song progression, just riffs, put on repeat. The music here really made me feel like they were either on a shoestring budget, or they just didn't care enough to put additional effort into it.
This is the part that really bummed me out. Because after that first intro song, I expected to hear a game soundtrack that I could put on my daily playlist. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. While a lot of the riffs were promising, they were just riffs. It just seemed like they just put it on repeat and didn't really add any substance to it. And it sucks because nothing upsets me more than wasted potential.
Even I can make more interesting music than what was used for the stage music in this game. And I'm all thumbs when it comes to making music.
I saved this part for last, because I feel like this is the single biggest crime against the Spawn franchise anyone could commit. The storytelling in this game is almost non-existent. Progressing through the game, I found it very hard to keep up with the story, but not because it was a bad story or anything. By all means, it was the kind of Spawn story I expected. Heaven has a world-destroying weapon that they are trying to use against Hell, and while Spawn doesn't really mind that Hell is about to get blown to, well, hell, destroying Earth while doing it just doesn't vibe with your boy, so it's up to him to stop it.
Storytelling in this game was everything that I expected it to be. It's everything I really needed it to be, honestly. My only gripe about it, aside from all the egregious gameplay violations and game design issues that they had, was how poor of a job the game did telling this story. And let me elaborate more on that. Spawn Armageddon is about 6 to 8 hours of gameplay, depending on how long you want to take collecting stuff. Out of that 6 hours, you get a total of 16 minutes of cutscenes explaining the story. You are literally making a game about comic books, which is one of the most articulate forms of storytelling out there. And instead of choosing to focus on the story or telling the story, it seems like you went the exact opposite and decided to cut budget from the storytelling to invest in what? Shitty gameplay mechanics? I mean, there were really literal parts in the game where I felt completely lost as far as where I was at in the story. This is because I spent so much time through gameplay that it was so sparse to get a cutscene. It's weird. You guys had access to Todd McFarlane himself, and the best you could give your players was 16 minutes of cutscenes, 16 minutes of storytelling. That's it? I'll end the story section like this. Had you reversed this whole decision and invested heavily in the story, and let's say added, I don't know, give me 45 minutes to an hour of storytelling, and keep everything else, bad combat and everything, I would have easily ranked this as one of my favorite games in the world had you just done that. Because the story was so rich, it was so awesome, I had to go back and read about it after playing the game. And it sucks, because this would have been something truly awesome had you really put the effort where it needed to be. I'll cap it off with this. Spawn Armageddon is another example of a really awesome IP being mishandled by developers and publishers who didn't know what they had. This was a really great opportunity to expose something as awesome as Spawn to the casual audience. But instead you can't, because you mire it with terrible gameplay and a lackluster storytelling aspect, and you really don't highlight its strengths. So unfortunately, Spawn Armageddon becomes a game that you can really only appreciate as a Spawn fan already, not as a new person coming in. And that's what I would suggest it for. If you're a huge Spawn fan, this game's pretty cool. If you're not, read the comics. Well, Scully, another day passed and another game down.
Congratulations, dummy. You didn't have to cheat to beat this one.
No, I didn't. Does that mean I can leave?
Ha! Beating one bad game all the way through with no cheating is but a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of games you're going to be playing to atone for your sins.
Yeah, I've been meaning to ask you about that. Are you sure I've committed gaming sins? I mean, Cheetos, Spawn, comic books. I don't really feel too tortured around here, dude.
Silence, dummy! The torture hasn't even begun to start. Enjoy your stay while you can, meatbag, because it's only going to get worse.
Well, you keep getting me Cheetos, comic books, and video games, I'll be alright staying a little bit longer.
You wash your hands before touching any of my stuff.
Alright, this is documented evidence that this is movie magic and not an actual crime against comic book humanity. Bag's not open, hands are clean. I'm only going to use one hand to touch these comics and kind of keep this hand in the bag. Also, I have This is like a spare copy. This is like something that came in with the action figure. It's pretty badass, actually. But anyways, this is not valuable. Hands are clean. Believe me, I'm cringing just shooting this scene. So let's get to it.